All right, I'm going to read from 156. This is control of motor functions. Control of motor functions. 156. Watching a highly skilled athlete perform a sports skill is exciting, but it really does not help us to appreciate the complex integration of the many parts of the nervous system required to perform this act. A pitcher throwing a baseball seems to the observer to be accomplishing a simple act, but in reality, this movement consists of complex interactions of higher brain centers with spinal reflexes performed together with precise timing. How the nervous system produces a coordinated movement has been one of the major unresolved mysteries facing neurophysiologists for many decades. Although progress has been made towards answering the basic question of how do humans control voluntary movements, much is still unknown about this process. Our purpose here will be to provide the reader with a simplistic overview of the brain and the control of movement. Traditionally, it was believed that the motor cortex controlled voluntary movement with little input from subcortical areas. However, evidence suggests that this is not the case. Although the motor cortex is the final executor of movement programs, it appears that the motor cortex does not give the initial signal to move, but rather it is at the end of the chain of neurophysiological events involved in volitional movement. The first step is performing a voluntary movement occurs in a subcortical and cortical motivational areas, which plays a key role in consciousness. This conscious prime drive sends signals to the so-called associating areas of the cortex, different from the motor cortex, which forms a rough draft of the planned movement from a stock of stored subroutines. Information concerning the nature of the plan of movement is then sent to both the cerebellum and the basal nuclei, clusters of neurons located in the cerebral hemispheres. These structures cooperate to convert the rough draft into precise temporal and spatial excitation programs. The cerebellum is possibly more important for making fast movements, whereas the basal nuclei are more responsible for slow or deliberate movements. From the cerebellum and basal nuclei, the precise program is sent through the thalamus to the motor cortex, which forwards the message down to spinal neurons for spinal tuning, and finally to skeletal muscles. Feedback to the CNS from muscle receptors and proprioceptors allows for modifications of motor programs if necessary. The ability to change movement patterns allows the individual to correct errors in the original movement plan. To summarize, the control of voluntary movement is complex and requires the cooperation of many areas of the brain as well as the several subcortical areas. Recent evidence suggests that the motor cortex does not by itself formulate the signals required to initiate voluntary movement. Instead, the motor cortex receives input from a variety of cortical and subcortical structures. Feedback to the CNS from muscle and joint receptors allows for adjustments to improve the movement pattern. Much is still unknown about the details of control of complex movement, and this topic provides an exciting frontier for future research. In summary, control of voluntary movement is complex and requires the cooperation of many areas of the brain as well as several subcortical areas. The first step in performing a voluntary movement occurs in the subcortical and cortical motivational areas, which send signals to the association cortex, which forms a rough draft of the planned movement. The movement plan is then sent to both the cerebellum and the basal nuclei. These structures cooperate to convert the rough draft into precise temporal and spinal excitation programs. The cerebellum is important for making fast movements, whereas the basal nuclei are more responsible for slower, deliberate movements. From the cerebellum and basal nuclei, the precise program is sent through the thalamus to the motor cortex, which forwards the message down to the spinal neurons for spinal tuning, and finally to the skeletal muscle. Feedback to the CNS from the muscle receptors and proprioceptors allows for the modification of motor programs if necessary. Alright, so that was page 156, going into the summary on page 157. See ya.